the whole concept of a website just became nothing more than a voice-based LLM.
I do believe that the marketing around AI agents is complete.
One thing we learned very early on in sales is that your biggest competitor on any deal is doing nothing.
Hello and welcome to Generation AI Podcast, episode 12, where every week, as usual, we cover news about AI, machine learning, data, and bridge the gap between business and technology when it comes to those topics. Callum, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think we've got some interesting topics coming up today. I think week on week, the show gains momentum, and I think that the topics we have today are so specific to the areas of AI that are really evolving quick, and I'm looking forward to today's episode.
So what do we have?
Well, first we're going to start with TensorStax getting $5 million in funding to automate data engineering with deterministic AI agents. We're also going to look at Y Combinator's request for startups. You wouldn't think that Y Combinator need to request for startups. They're probably inundated, but yet they are. So we're going to have a look at what that means for the development of AI startups, particularly in Silicon Valley. And then finally, a topic that is particularly interesting from my perspective, we're going to take a look at where we are today with the generative AI stack, where the gaps are, and a kind of real-time take on the emerging technology that is enabling the generative AI stack.
Are we going to talk again about the AI agents keyword?
I mean, it's a buzzword, right? There's no way you can get around it these days. If you're talking about generative AI, I think agents is the default, but we'll dig into what that actually means in practical terms as well.
I agree. I feel like people that are building and saying they're building just Gen AI are behind just because everybody's looking at agentic AI nowadays. So people need to upgrade the buzzword on their website to be in line with the world, right? They cannot just say Gen AI, they have to say agentic AI. Curious what will be the next term, the next buzzword, but let's dive into the first topic. So as you mentioned, TensorStax gets $5 million in funding, seed funding to automate data engineering with deterministic AI agents. A bit of context here. So TensorStax, a small company from the US, that basically builds, again, AI agents, let's say AI tools for for developer work, basically, for helping developers, data engineers, build better flows automatically when it comes to data. For people who don't know what data engineering is the, let's say, the practice of moving data from one side to the other, doing analytics, building data pipelines for training models, inference, business purposes, and so on. You can imagine data engineering as being the highway infrastructure of a country. It helps cars move from one place to the other. Well, one interesting thing about data engineering is that it has to be deterministic. So when you go from city A to city B, there's probably just one correct way to choose, right? You cannot just randomly go around until you find city B. Compared to the traditional software engineering, it's way more rigid and way stricter. So when you ask AI, for example, to build a website, if a button is 2 pixels to the left or to the right, you're probably good, right? It works. With data engineering, you need to be precise because we discussed previously, data is probably the most valuable asset companies have today, and you cannot make mistakes. It has to be accurate, has to be precise. What this company aims to do is basically build AI that's inherently random and not deterministic, and make it deterministic enough so that it can build pipelines that have zero margin for error. And here's the challenge here. So AI has, for a long time...
Can we just pause for a second and just...
Sure.
Let's just kind of try and unpack what that means for the average person, right? So you're saying that today, data engineering as a practice is deterministic in that it needs definable outcomes that are repeatable and 100% consistent. There is no room for kind of variety or plurality. It's just outcome A or outcome B is required.
Exactly.
So when you say they're building non-deterministic AI and then making it deterministic, Like, what does that mean, practically speaking?
Practically speaking, AI is not 100% deterministic or accurate, right? We always talk about loss,
Hallucinations.
metrics, hallucinations, accuracy. If you hear someone saying that, hey, my model is 100% accurate, there's a chance it could be, but usually this is a red flag, right? Usually people have models with 95%, 99%, 99.9% accuracy, right? But there's no model to rule them all in terms of accuracy. AI makes mistakes. That's why even when you go on ChatGPT, there's a small line there saying that always check the results of what the model generates because it could make mistakes. So AI is inherently, so the math behind AI is inherently random. We train models to be deterministic to a certain degree, accuracy, metric, whatever you're measuring there, right? We discussed before that in data engineering, there's no room for error. It's like summing up 2 and 2, right? It has to equal 4. You can just approximate 2 and 2 and have a margin of error in 1% of the cases,
I
right?
understand that bit, but you're saying that I'm still not quite clear on what Tensor Stacks is actually aiming to solve for here.
It's aiming to, truth be told, replace data engineers or at least augment a big chunk of their work. But just because we talked already a lot about how this is deterministic, this practice, this, let's say, niche of software engineering requires people to reason about the code they're writing and the transformations they're doing. Let's say they migrate data from one provider to a different provider, or they take inbound emails, they parse them, and they save information to specific databases, right? Those pipelines have to be accurate. And what they're trying to achieve is automate what data engineers do so they can focus on high-level business decisions. So instead of them designing data pipelines, they would instead focus on how do we use this data to drive business decisions instead of writing the code to move, I don't know, a line of data or billions of lines of data from one side to the other.
Got it. So it's automating the building of data pipelines.
If we would summarize this in very simple words, pretty much yes.
That sounds like something that is great on the surface, but in reality is absolutely so difficult to actually achieve.
I would say so. I mean, having worked with data pipelines at scale, just imagine like tens of billions of rows, you can just throw compute to the problem and hope it solves the problem, right? Because when a pipeline takes 1 day to run, you can just vibe code it, right? Change something today, see how it behaves tomorrow. It doesn't work. You iterate until the vibe is good, right? Until the code is good in your transformations. You need to use some human judgment. You need to know what you're doing. And AI is not there yet, and we've seen this before. Just throwing compute to the problem doesn't really solve it. We need to rethink some fundamentals first before throwing language models or any other kind of models to the problem. We need to rethink how we push the boundaries of the confidence levels of those models, basically. What was the term? The determinism, the level of determinism of those models. Cool. What's your take on this? I know this has been a slightly more technical topic.
It's very technical. I think I've seen various companies like this before. Like I actually interviewed for a company called Ascend, ascend.io, if you want to pull up the website. And yeah, they profess to do something super similar. I think the problem with this is the implementation. Like I think it's very because everybody has such different structures, and not just technology structures, but also people structures. Like all of the processes today inside a company are not just built around their tech stack or their data stack, but they're also based around a bunch of data engineers and a CTO and there's political interest and so I think it's really difficult to roll out a tool when you're talking about automating data pipelines for all companies because every single company is different. And so I think the pitch is good. The implementation in practice, I think, is very hard.
That's real, right? Because as you correctly pointed out, there's many companies out there with each of them coming with their own structure. And you mentioned business and people structure, right? I would also mention data structure. So companies have very custom data structures to meet the needs of their particular business. So when you build a one size fits all, you cannot make mistakes. You cannot, instead of 1,000 columns, return 200 just because your AI said so.
A lot of these infrastructures as well are very, very fragile, and they're live infrastructures. You know, it's kind of like it's like doing open heart surgery on a patient. You know, it's
With a shaky hand.
so the way what exactly so where I come in it from a business perspective to say that good luck to that company, but they better be very, very clear on what their target audience is, because there's like a lot of switching costs and risk involved in adopting a project like this. So you better make sure that whoever you're targeting at this product at has a very big problem that they have a very high degree of urgency to solve, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to justify doing open heart surgery on their tech stack to their CTO.
True. And this company also needs to have like a significant, so the combination of your solution plus a target company needs to have significant upside for the company.
Exactly, that's what I'm
Otherwise, they'll
saying.
just use nice technology, but it wouldn't provide ROI. That's not a winning game.
Exactly. One thing we learned very early on in sales is that your biggest competitor on any deal is doing nothing, the client deciding to do nothing. And I just think with technologies like this, they may be great and innovative. And this is the difficulty with innovative technologies, right? Innovative technologies often have the opportunity to create massive improvements, but with a massive amount of risk attached to them if it doesn't work. So
So you're
inertia
saying
is
doing
real.
nothing might be better,
Yeah,
probabilistically.
if I'm a salesperson in that company, I'm like, this is going to be hard, because the cost of doing nothing is very, very low when you're dealing with a really important thing in your business, because it works and it's really important. And the cost of doing something, if you've got an open heart surgery type product, is very, very high. Like if you're a doctor, the last thing you're going to want to do is open up your patient's heart, right? The only reason they do that is because it's absolutely essential, or that person will die. And I think it's kind of like these products, particularly when they're at startup stage, they kind of have a similar vibe to me, where they sound great in theory, but good luck with the practice.
Clients need to take huge risks to adopt this kind of product.
Which is why as we discuss all the time internally, is POCs, POCs, POCs. No client is going to go big bang from day one with this kind of tech.
They need to have some track record, or at least a way to try without any risk.
Exactly. You need to de-risk the project.
I mean, speaking about risk, let's switch to the next topic. We're talking about Y Combinator's request for startups. I mean, startups are inherently risky, and YC acknowledges that 2025 is indeed shaping up to be the year of AI agents. I think all of our topics today mention at least once AI agents. Even YC does it. But it's interesting that YC has to request for startups. It feels to me like market guidance here. Like, hey, this is where we think you, the founder, the builder, this is where we think you should be looking towards when it comes to directions for your next venture. And I want us to go through some handpicked directions that they pointed out. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and also give mine when it comes to like the feasibility or the future of AI. So just to quickly list them all, they want the following. They want full stack AI companies, voice AI, AI personal assistants. They want to invest in the future of education. They want an internal agent builder, and they want AI voice assistants for email. What's your take on the list?
Very bullish on voice AI. Very, very, very bullish on voice AI. I think that if you look at the AI stack today, as we'll go on to discuss in the next topic, AI only really works with use cases that are based almost entirely around human interaction today. Like generative AI use cases only work if the human isn't just in the loop, but is at the center of the loop. And not because they want to be, but because they have to be for the experience to work. And so I think voice, obviously, like if you think about any time you need to speak to a company ever about anything, typically you're doing that by voice because that's the quickest way to actually get a response. You call them, the last thing you want to do is send an email, right? You'll be waiting for 3-4 days. So, you're searching for that phone number. I think voice is just such a no-brainer. I think the first big high volume job that will go are these kind of contact center agents. I don't think in 5 years' time you're going to be calling into a contact center to speak to a human. No way.
We talked about this on the last podcast, that there's three main modalities that people have their eyes on at the moment. It's text, and it became obvious 2.5 years ago when OpenAI launched GPT-3 that text is a very important modality. People like to work with text. They don't like structure. They just want to express their thoughts in a simple text box and just get a response, right? Text is now everywhere. The next modality, as you pointed out, is voice, right? People don't like to type. They want to speak and have the agent reply or have the agent do something. And the modality that people are looking at and they're increasingly bullish on is intent. So you don't even have to speak. You just need to have the intent to do something. And this, from the point of view of some people in the startup world, would be the modality of the future. So you wouldn't even need to call in this call center.
So what's the use case? That's really interesting. So what's like an intent to voice use case?
I would say intent to action more than that. So I'm thinking of building this startup. I should just connect somehow my intent to, let's say, an agent or an interface or whatever that is, and it'll take over the whole process. I don't have to prompt it. I don't have to explain to it how I want to build my startup. I don't want to write code. I just want to have the intent and the idea in my mind. I need to convey that somehow to an intelligent system, not to call it agent. And I want that system to build or do the action on my behalf. And I think this is, so let's start with the first direction they're going towards. They want full stack AI companies. So in my opinion, what they're saying here is that we don't want yet another GPT wrapper. We want you to rethink how you build your AI and build it from the ground up and have a full stack AI company, not just a nice website.
I think that's a contradiction in terms. It's a contradiction in terms. Is it? I mean, it's a nice idea, but like, we don't yet have a full AI stack. So how can we have like what I mean is if your intention is, if the exam question is, okay, I want you to take this company and I want you to build it again from scratch using only AI, we don't have a sophisticated enough stack today to do that. You can maybe build
this is the right answer, right? Because YC wouldn't be asking for this if they had a solution already.
Yeah, I mean, I think YC looking 10, 20, 15, 20 years into the future, I think if you're wanting to build a multi-billion-dollar company and IPO in 10 years' time, you probably build a full-stack AI company. I think if you're wanting to build a startup and you actually want to make some money in the next couple of years, you're not trying to build a full-stack AI company because we don't have a full AI stack yet.
Depends what game you're playing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think
AI.
in short, and this is my last comment on this, but I think in short, like, I would take this list with a pinch of salt, right? Because YC have a very long time horizon. YC are quite happy to see the company today, and for that, and to, like, they're the earliest of early investors. They're like pre-seed, pre-seed.
Intent level.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So they they can come up with these concepts, but I don't think any of these things are going to happen soon apart from voice.
Speaking about voice, second topic is voice AI, very broad. And they basically have the same reasoning. So we've interacted the same way for a long time now. It's time to change the way we interact with systems. With each other, we already do voice, right? But whenever we speak through a system, it's mostly text, unless you do voice messages. What's your take on this?
I think I've given my take on voice AI. I'm bullish. What's your take?
Yeah, I think voice is a nice next step from text. I wish one day that I won't have to type anything. I'll just speak to whatever form of intelligence on my phone or computer. They'll pick up the intent from my voice and do the thing I'm asking them to do. Instead of me going, authenticating to my cloud provider, building my infrastructure, sending emails, all the full stack of building a business. I want that to be voice driven. And I want the agent or the intelligence system to understand what I'm trying to do, link that to the whole context, and get the thing done on my behalf.
Mm.
And this leads us to the next request for startup type. It's the AI personal assistant. And it basically asks people to build something that doesn't just help them with to-do lists, but more like move things from a to-do list to the done list. How you correctly pointed before we started recording, you don't want agents to help you, you want agents to get the job done on your behalf. Kind of act on from idea all the way to completion. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not particularly bullish on AI personal assistants, though. To be honest, like I think it's a lot of hype right now because whilst AI personal assistants can't take action, they're pretty useless personal assistants, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, but maybe we can say that for the next topic.
But what about personal assistants that can take action?
Well, that would be great, but I don't think they exist right now.
That's why they're asking for them, right? It's a request for startups, so keep this in mind. Next request for startup.
When I say they don't exist, I mean that the technological architecture for taking action doesn't exist. Yet. That's the issue. Like I think the use cases are endless. We can talk about AI personal assistants. We can talk about all the other actions, but like it depends how the stack develops, right? For instance, we had MCP. MCP has thousands of different use cases, but are you suggesting that startups are going to develop their own action layers, and we're going to have like thousands of different action layers that are specific to each use case? Or like the stack evolutions that have come before, is there going to be a general standard for taking actions using AI? I think the latter is way more likely than 1,000 different startups building 1,000 different ways to build actions.
I think that's MCP, right? That's what you just said is the direction that MCP is going towards. So we've had for the last many years APIs that we can use to interact programmatically with a product and their service. I think where this is shifting towards is we have APIs for engineers to hook up. We'll have AI APIs that models will automatically use through MCP. And it'll come back to you and say, hey, I need $1,000 budget to use this API for this reason. I'll just figure it out myself, just approve the budget.
I understand. I understand, but that's not really what I'm saying. So MCP is like a standard context layer, right? Just like models are a standard thinking layer, and large language models are a standard language layer. There's a common standard, a bit like HTTP. Mm-hmm. So I suppose my question to you is there going to be a standard that we're going to use for action layers? Because MCP is not an action layer, right? It's just a context layer. It just pulls in data. So what I'm saying is, are we going to have a similar standard for action? Or do you think startups are just going to build out their own bespoke action layers and there's no common standard? So all startups use LLMs, all startups use MCP, but then they all build out their own action layers? Or will there be a common global standard for action itself?
I think we'll get to a point where we'll have the MCP of the action layer, because as we talked, I think 2 episodes ago, we've had APIs, right? We've had HTTPS. People started building verticals. Then we had a new horizontal to cover them all. And then people built verticals again. And now the new horizontal is MCP. If all startups start the, let's say, action race from MCP, they'll build verticals until some startup, some bigger company will say, here's a new horizontal for taking actions. I think this is how you build sustainable things, right? You need new horizontals every now and then.
I agree.
Otherwise, it'll diverge too much.
I agree. Just conscious of time. Should we move on to the final topic?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, cool. So I think the final thing we want to talk about today is taking a step back and understanding where we are with the generative AI stack. And, my point of view is pretty clear, right? I think that, there's been all this talk around AI copilots and how AI can make you more efficient. And I think that's a nice idea, but I think the medium-term trajectory of the generative AI stack is that it replaces knowledge workers. I think that exactly the same thing that happened when, farmers had the agricultural revolution, and then we had the industrial revolution, and a massive amount of people were displaced. But no one wishes they still worked on farms. No one's calling for the days where 99% of us had to be on farms, right? But I think all of the high-paying jobs that we have today, lawyers, accountants, doctors, salespeople, engineers, I think they are actually all going to be replaced by the generative AI stack. It just seems inevitable to me at this point. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either. I think that could end up being a really good thing for reasons that we can go into if we have time. But now is the time to take a step back and go, okay, well, let's assume that all workers get replaced by the generative AI stack. What does that stack actually look like in practical terms? And what do we have today? And what are we still missing? And so just to quickly break it down, I think there are 3 elements to the generative AI stack today. We have the brain at the bottom, the model, the large language model, the generalized model, the brain that is capable of understanding, reasoning, and I suppose understanding the world around it based on the data that it can take in, and then giving a point of view and essentially that reasoning engine, right? For want of a better phrase, let's call it the brain. And then we have the MCP layer on top, which is the model context protocol. This is the thing that gives it the context and the data and the awareness in real time so that that brain can actually operate effectively. In many ways, the MCP is almost like the nervous system. It's giving that kind of real-time information to the brain so that it can actually make context-based decisions. And so that's the stack as it stands today. But what we're still missing is that action layer. Okay, so you've got the brain, you've got the context, but now you actually need to do something. And I think we still don't have that global action layer today, and that tells me a couple of things. And I'll be as brief as I can, but it tells me for a start that agents are bullshit. Because an agent, when you think of an AI agent, it implies an autonomous worker, and an autonomous worker would have to have the whole stack working. It would have to do the thinking, the context, and the action, and it would all have to be autonomous. That's what an agent would be. So my question to you is, assuming that agents are bullshit and that there is no defined action layer today, if we take the existing stack, what are the key areas of focus for building out use cases? What are the key areas where you want to build the first action use cases, where that's actually possible? And if you can't build the action use cases, the end-to-end use cases, where do you focus on next?
2 points here. So you mentioned that AI agents, so assuming AI agents are bullshit. I fundamentally don't think AI agents are bullshit. I do believe that the marketing around AI agents is complete bullshit. It's overhyped. People are overselling. Clients become confused and don't know what to think anymore. And start thinking that, hey, you don't use AI agents, your product must be suboptimal just because you're not keeping up with whatever X, Y, and Z is doing, right? With AI agents. This is what I think is bullshit, the marketing around AI agents. Back to your question on what's the missing link to achieve true generative AI and have people, I want to say properly replaced, but productively replaced, right? So taking a step back to how people were farming back in the days. Of course, they were doing it with shovels, like manual tools, right? Until the vehicles and all the machines they're using now.
But now a lot
came
less
around.
people work on farms as a result, right?
True, and those people reprofiled and they built better and bigger things. And instead of working on farms, they're maybe building restaurants now with the produce from the farms. So to your point that you made earlier, I don't think it's a bad thing some people get replaced. That people will need to adapt. And I think a very important currency in today's AI-driven world is how fast do you adapt to a changing environment? How fast do you adapt to some AI taking half of your job? I think this is good, right? It creates a need for people to be creative about the things they're doing. To answer your last point on what do you think will be the first use case that will be completely automated by AI, I think it's linked to communication. Just think how much time we spend communicating over email, WhatsApp, tickets at work, or any other written or online form of communication. What if instead of me communicating with you, we just have our agents to communicate, set a meeting for the podcast, maybe set the agenda, and we just come here and we speak about the agenda? I think communication is going to be one of the areas that we'll see automation in.
I agree.
I don't need to update my tickets, my engineering tickets, right? The model will just look at what I've been doing. It'll figure out, yeah, this feature is done. I'll just go and update it and inform all the other people that need to know about this.
I agree. I think, again, because there's no action layer, the human being is still the action layer today, right? So the human being needs to obviously create action in the first place. It needs to actually, if you think about it, there's two layers of action. There's actually the action to input information into the LLM, for instance, in the first place. So I need to tell ChatGPT what I want to talk about today. And then I need to, there's like that first action, right? So you've got to actually prompt the LLM, for instance, to do something. That's an action. I'm still doing that. It's not autonomous. ChatGPT doesn't fire itself up in the morning until I tell it to do something. So I do that action. And then you be using MCP, it could be doing other things, but then ultimately, once the LLM and MCP interact, the outcome they produce then needs to be actioned. And again, it's not the AI stack that's doing that. So if you think about it, then the human has to be centric to the loop in a way that is beneficial to the human. And there's primarily two ways where humans want to be in the loop. One is, if they have a problem to solve, so that's why customer service is like a massive use case, because not only does the human being need to be in the loop, they want to be in the loop. They want to know why their product's broken or what they can do to get a discount on their, because they've just had food poisoning at a restaurant. So MCP and LLMs or models plus MCP is enough for those use cases. But for me, that's the next big one. It's MCP and LLMs are the use cases that are best served are ones that require human-centric interactions. Another really interesting use case for me is where you require human interaction today, but there currently is no human interaction. But it might be beneficial for the client to have a kind of a human-like interaction. I'll give you an example. If you walk into a high-end fashion shop today, and you've got $20,000 handbags, 90% chance that within 10 seconds of you walking into that store, you'll be walked up to by a very smartly dressed, usually attractive salesperson. And that salesperson will be there to help you understand about the products, maybe get you a cup of coffee, whatever. Whereas if you go to the same company's website and looking at the same handbags, there is no interaction whatsoever.
So people still sell to people and buy from people.
People still sell to people and buy from people, but when there is no person there, there's no selling being done. And I'm pretty sure that clients would want some selling to be done if that could be integrated within the user interface. Today, it's just static. It's just you're scrolling through the handbags. And I'm sure if there's a way that a client could input a salesperson into that online experience, they would do it. But there's no way to do it with a human being. There is a way to do it with an LLM plus MCP.
Back to the point from the last podcast that people want chatbots, but sometimes a chatbot is not what they need. I feel like you're hinting towards an actual chatbot on the handbag side. You just give
It doesn't even need to be.
It would nudge you.
Yeah, exactly. But an intent-based one, right? So there's nothing more annoying than walking into the handbag shop and immediately being accosted by a salesperson. Like you just got in there for 5 seconds, you're just having a look around, go away. That's most people's interpretation. However, if you're stood at the handbag section and you have your hand on a particularly nice handbag for 10 minutes and you're looking at every single edge and whatever, doing your research, it would be probably quite useful to have a salesperson come over to you and give you some more information about the handbag. The online experience should be the same, I think.
So you're saying that people should be, in a way, profiled the way that they just walk through the virtual store. And whenever the system thinks that a human is attracted by a product or has a high or an increasing intent towards a product or a category of products, it will be like, hey, have you checked this out?
100%. 100%. And these products already exist today, but they're very ineffective. They try to do things like web personalization, they track cookies, et cetera, but no one's done this with LLM plus MCP yet. No one's actually, because then it's truly one-to-one. Most of these tools are just kind of like decision trees. If they spend 5 minutes on this, send them this message, but none of it's like real-time, personalized. And this is what we can now do with LLM and MCP.
But you're also assuming that people are walking, let's say, scrolling through a website similar to how they're walking through a store. And I think things have changed. So for me, my buying habits, right? When I need to buy something online, I go on the website, I know the product, I buy it. I'm not sidetracked by any other.
That's how you buy. That's how you buy. I can tell you, women
in an Apple store, I mean, I've got all the Apple products. I still try all the Apple products in an Apple store because I love the experience.
Yeah, okay.
So
yeah.
I'm still in person doing the in-person thing. So you're assuming that people are moving online because they want to walk through a store on the website, right? But some people still want to buy from people.
Sure.
Some people don't want to buy from AI. And some people don't want to be sold by AI, as much as we love AI and we want it to do all the things, right?
But the guy who owns the store doesn't care if he sells more handbags as a result of it.
That's true. If you just look at the ROI, that's true.
I mean, who's the one paying for the solution?
The client.
The client just wants to sell more handbags. And I think if you put an LLM, an intent-based LLM with MCP into that process, I think they'll sell more handbags. And some people might be annoyed by it, but like we're annoyed by pop-ups. Pop-ups are the most annoying, useless thing in the world. But if they didn't work, they wouldn't be on the websites.
I agree. I mean, as long as they generate sales, they don't care about the fact they annoy the users, right?
But
so it's
the thing is as well is it doesn't have to be annoying. It can genuinely improve the buying experience. Like, and that's the art of it, right? The art of it is knowing when to trigger the LLM chatbot so that it's not annoying, so that it is helpful, so that it does add value to the buying experience.
I feel we got sidetracked a bit here with the whole handbag buying example, but I think the essence of this is relevant, right? Text, long gone. Voice, yeah, sure. You go in a store and you get sold to through voice. I think the getting sold experience of the future is intent based, right? This is what you're saying with your very hands-on example.
Yeah. I mean, do you know what? It would be super useful. Like for instance, when we were buying all of the equipment for this podcast, I had the entire conversation on ChatGPT about what equipment I should be buying and why I should be buying it. I would much rather. I mean, I presume that Sony had more information on their camera than ChatGPT did or does. So it would have been great if I could have just gone to the Sony website and said, right, Sony, I'm looking for a camera. Talk to me. And I think that's when it works very well for like a considered purchase, when there is a lot of complexity and a lot of cost. Like if you're spending $5,000 on a mattress, and then you go onto the website and it says, all right, so this mattress is $5,000, and here's 6 scientific studies that were authored to prove that this improves your sleep quality. I would love to go onto the website of that mattress company and say, hey, can you just give me a concise breakdown of the science behind your mattress and why it works? And can I have this conversation of a voice? And I don't even have to speak to a salesperson. I don't have to speak to an actual salesperson who's going to be pushy and send me multiple emails. I could just get the information I need.
So you want that very nice, easy to communicate with salesperson from a physical store embedded in the website.
Yes, like if you think about it today, like why do we go on websites? And we'll make this point brief because I know we're overrunning, but I think it's genuinely interesting. Why do we go on websites? We go on websites because we're looking for information primarily. And so there are some websites with hundreds of pages because their products are genuinely complex. Like I used to work with a pharmaceutical company. They sold pharma diagnostic equipment, and they had like 3,000 different pharmaceutical diagnostic equipment products. Can you imagine how painful it is to buy from that company when you have 3,000 different products and you have
because of decision fatigue? So you want to drop the decision fatigue and the decision time through an AI nudging you in the right direction.
Imagine if we got rid of websites as we know it today, and actually the whole concept of a website just became nothing more than a voice-based LLM.
That's the future. And only the future will tell whether or not people want websites or just a nice, simple voice interface, right?
We have gone way over. So if you're still listening to this, then it's because you're as obsessed with it as we are with these topics. But
thanks for listening to us while we went through handbags and mattresses and quite off-topic discussions, however, linked to how intent-based AI could change the future of the shopping experience.
There you go. That's the clip. All right. See you next week, guys.
See you next week. Thanks for joining.